manager of publicity and advertising. So I was the trafficker of all this marketing. Like I had the boss that wrote it, I would proofread it, go to the print shop, da da da. I was the mailing labels, get it out to so and so. And it was the tie-in books or the necklaces for the cartoons or posters or the album soundtrack for Chariots of Fire.
Hmm.
These albums at the time, all the, creating campaigns around. I remember I worked on a campaign for The Outsiders. And I came up with and I gradually would try and insert my ideas because again, it was like I was just
Uh-huh.
supposed to just put stuff in the envelopes and stuff. And that, so again, I'm a 22-year-old kid or 21, 22-year-old kid. So I'd say, well, don't you think it would, why don't you try this, And so one couple of campaigns I worked on was The Outsiders because I was again on the desk of this department. I was the person that answered the phone, and I also got the mail. And
Uh-huh.
so what started to come in were these fan letters for the movies Outsiders. Remember Tom Cruise and Ralph Macchio and all these things.
Oh.
So these girls, when you hear all these girls were writing these fan letters. I guess they got Warner Brothers, for some reason they landed on my desk and I was, sitting there and I was like, oh, these girls, write these letters. And I said, and they were trying to create this, remember the 4-color ads for Variety, and they still have them actually still there. So I was like, well, why don't you like use these letters in the campaign and their fan letters, and they're writing how much they love the movie. And everybody kind of looked at each other and then looked at me and like, what did you say? I said, yeah, it's like, here's all these letters, if anything's going to sell the movie that make people want to know, see that people watch the movie, this is what you should do. And they
Uh-huh.
did it. They ran
Nice.
with that. And the other thing I came up with was for the cartoons because I was overseeing the cartoon stuff too at the time, and nobody cared about the cartoons. But I was a kid watching the cartoons as a kid and still loved them as a almost adult. Watching them on Saturday mornings with some Lucky Charms and
Hmm.
so I still love the cartoons, and so I came up with this campaign or proposal of how to resurrect the cartoon campaigns. And I just said, let's do like frozen foods, or let's do, take the necklaces and put them with children's clothes. I mean, it was like a 3 or 4 or 5-page proposal.
Uh-huh.
And I just took it on my own initiative to write it. And they went through and incorporated like 3 or 4, 2 or 3 of those. I know they did the frozen foods because I just went and found them, in fact, for some share with them.
You should be getting royalties. Uh,
You think, right? And but yeah, they implemented that stuff, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and
mhm.
creating things, campaigns for the conventions, and yeah. So
And these were the heavy hitters. These are Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, I
yeah,
imagine. And
yeah, they were the heavy hitters. And then the feature stuff, it was the tail. How many Superman movies were there? I know I didn't do the first one. I don't think it was the second one. I think I did the third and the fourth. I did remember those Clint Eastwood movies. I worked on that. I did work on Blade Runner. I did work on Chariots
Mhm.
of Fire. I did work on the first feature script I read was Night Shift. That was Brian Grazer's first film, because we had to
Um,
go through scripts too. The other thing that I didn't do all the time, but one of the things was a task of the department was
mhm.
we had to read the scripts for a network dubs because if there were any curse words, they
Right.
had to go through an ADR or a dub or bleh. So it was going through the script and seeing where that needed to be done.
Mhm. Well, that's cool. And so you're in your 20s, you're at Warner Brothers Publicity, and then eventually you move on to be the producing partner of Danny Glover. And I'm wondering how did you make that transition? Was it a long transition? What were the steps in between?
Well, I left Warner Brothers, like 83. I didn't go meet Danny until like God, coming up on 10 years later. And in between
Oh,
that
wow.
time, I worked again in publicity at Children's Television Workshop, and I had a daughter, and I took some time off with her and
Mhm.
um that period. And then I had another key job. It was that transition. Well, 2 jobs actually. When I went
Uh-huh.
back to the work after my daughter was really young, I went to work at ICM.
Mm.
in New York for Nancy Josephson before she moved to LA, and I worked on her desk for a few months, but like I said, before she moved to Los Angeles, but that was again another educational experience because I'll never forget the day I walked in there and I saw all these scripts in these cabinets, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is what happens to scripts. They don't all get made, they're just in these file cabinets. That's what happens to them." So that was like the NYU dramatic writing person going in there. Oh my God.